April 17, 1995.
With just minutes to go before the filing deadline, the streets are filled with people.
We've got number one. Come on up, number one.
Taxes. They're complicated, cumbersome, confusing.
This is your tax that you have to pay.
Is there a better way?
The flat tax. People like the simplicity of it. They like the honesty of it.
The flat tax proposals that are out there now will increase the deficit and increase taxes on all Americans with incomes of under $200,000 a year.
Tonight, the flat tax. Is it the better way?
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Cokie Roberts.
By the time this program is over, the tax deadline will have passed for most Americans. The annual nightmare of going through the files, filling out the forms, or turning them over to an accountant will be over. But what if instead of pages and pages of numbers with 53 pages of instructions, all you had to do was fill out a postcard? Just figure out what you earned and take a percentage for the federal government. No deductions, no credits, no one tax rate for some people, another tax rate for others. Everyone pays the same percentage, no matter how much you make. It's called the flat tax, and it's fast gaining popularity in Washington. This is not a new idea. In fact, it's been around for a good while, espoused sometimes by conservative Republicans, sometimes by liberal Democrats. The flat tax has never had any prospect of going anywhere before, never been taken seriously. But times have changed. Here's Nightline correspondent Chris Bury.
In Santa Rosa, California today, an IRS agent took pies in the face for a charity fundraiser. In Washington, the IRS choir serenaded taxpayers at the post office. But for many last-minute filers, it was business as usual, coping with a tax code that inspires so much fear and loathing.
It simply is too complicated, and I think people have trouble relating to the way the tax system currently is.
It is very confusing, very confusing. And not everybody has the money to go to a CPA or to H&R Block or whatever, you know, so therefore you have to read up on the tax laws, you have to stay abreast, and it just becomes a hassle.
And you know, I'll tell you, there are a lot of crazy things going on with the IRS. I mean, it's a situation where in some cases it's a bureaucracy gone amok.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's too big, and it's too complicated. And I think there's a widespread general agreement in America. We got to get rid of the tax code as you and I know it today.
Texas Congressman Dick Armey, the Republican majority leader, believes he has the perfect remedy.
Now, the question is, how do we replace it? I believe the flat tax is the way to replace it. I think it's the most fair, direct, and honest way to collect taxes from the American people.
Armey says you could file his flat tax on this postcard. His plan begins with big personal exemptions. $13,100 for individuals, $5,300 for each dependent. A family of four would pay no taxes on the first $36,800 of income. After that, all earned income would be taxed at a flat rate of 17%, no matter how much money you make.
There are no itemized deductions, no standard deductions, nothing. Just a family allowance. It's very generous, and the flat 17% rate.
Home interest deduction.
All of that is gone.
Charity.
All of that is gone.
Employer-paid medical.
It's all gone. All the complexity, all the difficulty, and everybody says, look, I'm getting treated the same as everybody else.
Well, not everybody says that.
Turns out it raises taxes for almost everybody in the country, except for the very rich. They get gigantic cuts. Most people pay $1,500, $2,000 a year more in taxes.
Robert McIntyre heads a consumer group called Citizens for Tax Justice.
You have a flat rate that exempts interest, dividends, and capital gains. It has to be gigantic tax cuts for the high-income people. And once you've done that, who's going to make up the difference? Well, it's people in the middle.
Here's how it might work according to an estimate prepared for Time magazine. A family of four earning $50,000 that pays $4,249 in taxes now would save more than $2,000 under the Army plan, a 47% cut in their tax bill. A family earning $200,000 and paying $46,000 in taxes would save more than $18,000, a 40% reduction in taxes.
The main losers would be middle-income families, incomes in the upper five-figure range and just above $100,000 perhaps, who would be facing higher marginal tax rates in many cases than they now do, and who would lose important personal deductions that they are now able to claim.
Here at the Treasury, officials have concluded Congressman Armey's version of a flat tax would cost the country nearly $200 billion in lost revenue every year. To keep the Treasury from losing that money, they say, the flat tax rate would have to be significantly raised from 17% to at least 23%. Little noticed in Armey's flat tax is an even more radical proposition to eliminate federal withholding altogether.
The American people can sit down, take their own earned income, and pay their share to the government for taxes, just as they do their house payment or their rent or their car payment. And in each check they write, they can ask the question, do I get my money's worth?
But would people really pay the taxes they owe if the money were not withheld from their paychecks? Former IRS Commissioner Shirley Peterson is skeptical.
The overall voluntary compliance rate with respect to legal income is estimated to be in the range of about 83% at the present time. Every 1 percentage point of noncompliance costs our country about $7.3 billion annually. We simply can't afford to have the voluntary compliance rate go down.
The flat tax has been floated and sunk before.
If you like the present tax code and the elite that maintains it, then you vote for Clinton.
Liberal Democrat Jerry Brown made it the centerpiece of his primary campaign in 1992 and was widely ridiculed. But the drum roll for a flat tax is growing in both parties.
I think the American people are fed up with a tax system that drives them crazy.
The purpose of this commission is to move beyond tax reform to a complete overhaul of the entire tax system.
We will be talking about flat taxes.
In the Capitol, the business of tax breaks attracts lobbyists like Little Elf.
Every lobbying group you can think of has a stake in this reform battle, and members of Congress will hear from them. That means the lobbying will be intensive, expensive, dirty, maybe dishonest, but you won't be able to ignore the fact that it's happening.
All those tax deductions to be eliminated have their benefactors, from the healthcare professions to organized charities. The housing industry is already girding for a fight over the long, sacred home mortgage deduction.
The tax benefits for home ownership account for about 15% of the value of the home, which means that if you eliminate those tax benefits, the immediate impact is a reduction in value of approximately 15% in owned homes. That wipes out a tremendous amount of consumer wealth, cuts down on consumption, begins that chain of events.
We take it as a point of fact that 90% of the enemies of the flat tax work in Washington, D.C., within the Beltway. Yes, the lobbyists are not going to like the flat tax.
The Clinton administration does not like the flat tax either, but Washington is starting to take it seriously. The Senate has held hearings, presidential hopefuls are crafting positions, and some Republicans want a flat tax in their 1996 platform. After all, what could be a safer political bet than promising a simple solution to a complicated tax code that everybody loves to hate? This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Washington.
When we return, we'll be joined by the man leading the drive for a flat tax and by a columnist who says the flat tax may be more simple, but a lot less fair.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ford Motor Company.
I will build a motor car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials by the best men and women to be hired. Any person making a good salary will be able to own one and enjoy with his family the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces.
Thanks to Sprint Business, now the world is flat. Introducing flat rate pricing for small businesses on all your long distance, even for Sprint 800 service. Enhanced facts and cellular long distance. One low, flat rate for everything, all over the country, so you know just what you're paying.
Now that's simple.
Call now for flat rate pricing. 1-800-827-3700. Call Sprint Business.
Tomorrow on World News Tonight, is it medicine the next generation?
We're up to full flow, line pressure's good.
A new battery-powered heart is saving human lives. Watch and you'll understand on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
It's yours. The Mazda 25th anniversary celebration is your chance to get $1,500 cash back on a 94 B4000 truck. American-made Mazda trucks offer a bigger V6 than Toyota or Nissan, and no truck has a better basic warranty. So hurry in now, before these 94s are gone forever.
At your Puget Sound Mazda dealer now.
Julia Murray is doing something her allergies and the pollen never let her do before. She's watching one of the finest 9-year-olds ever to play the game, thanks to Benadryl, the histamine blocker. Take Benadryl and take back your life.
Today, the way to get allergy relief without dyes is clear. Benadryl dye-free with Benadryl's histamine-blocking strength to relieve your runny nose, itchy eyes, and sneezing. Benadryl dye-free, the allergy relief you need without the dyes you don't.
Joining us now from our Washington Bureau, former Congressman Jack Kemp is co-director of Empower America. He's also chair of the newly formed GOP Tax Commission. And from our Boston Bureau, Robert Kuttner is co-editor of the American Prospect and writes a nationally syndicated column on economics. Well, a postcard to fill out your taxes instead of the agony most of us have just been through. It sounds too good to be true. Congressman Kemp, is it too good to be true? Is this something you've worked on for a long time?
Well, it's something I believed in for a long time, Cokie. I'm sure that Professor Kuttner will strongly disagree. However, it seems to me with this day in which about 5 billion hours of people's time has been spent trying to fill out and comply with about 9,000 pages of IRS regulations, the time for a flat tax has come. It's not just fairness and simplicity. It seems to me, Cokie, one of the most overriding and profound arguments for a flatter, fair, what Bob Dole called a flatter, fairer, simpler tax rate system would be the impact it would have on the tax base, on the economy, on making capital and credit more available to lower income people and help lift that tide that John F. Kennedy talked about that can raise the boats of economic activity.
Robert Kuttner, fairer?
Well, problem with it is, first of all, that it's unfair. You heard in the piece that began this show, Cokie, that people making $50,000 a year are going to get a break. People making $200,000 a year are going to get a break. People making less than $37,000 a year are going to get a break. Well, if everybody gets a break, who pays the taxes? And the other problem with it is that it mixes up the ideal of simplicity with the ideal of fairness. You can have a much simpler tax code. You can get rid of all the credits, all the exemptions, all the deductions. But you can still preserve the idea that people who make more money ought to pay tax at a higher rate, and ordinary people ought to pay tax at a lower rate. You can simplify the whole tax code and not get rid of the ideal of tax progressivity. The simplest part of figuring out your taxes is multiplying the taxable income times the rate. The complicated part is figuring out what your taxable income is. So I think the Republicans have done a very clever job of bait and switch by confusing the idea of simplification with the idea of a flat rate. You can have all the simplification you want and still have a graduated rate structure.
Well, may I
yes,
have a shot at that? I think Bob Kuttner is making a pretty typical mistake, if I might say so, in confusing tax rates with tax revenues. I love to quote President Kennedy's New York Economic Club speech in 1962, in which he said, "It's a paradoxical truth that high tax rates cause low tax revenues," and he said before trying to cut the tax rates by 30% in the early 1960s that he wanted to bring down the rates to expand the tax base. As I said earlier, American people spend $5 billion hours a year trying to fill out and comply with tax consequence. They should be using that time to produce widgets, to produce more capital formation, to create more savings, and make the economy grow, and if we had a bigger economy, we would ultimately get more revenue. I think even Bob Kuttner would agree with that.
Well, I wouldn't agree with it, Jack, because we tested this theory in 1981 with the supply-side tax cuts, and it didn't work. Well, as everybody knows, the main thing we got from the supply-side tax cuts was a quadrupling of the federal deficit.
Well,
and
Bob,
now the same crowd is saying, well, let's do it again.
Well,
and
Bob,
now the same crowd is saying, well, let's do it again. And the technical experts at the Treasury are saying that if you do this with Congressman Armey's 17% rate, you're going to widen the deficit by $200 billion a year.
Oh, that's
and
nonsense.
Congressman Kemp, what about that, though, Congressman? Some of your colleagues in the Republican Party have said, quite frankly, that one of the things they want to do is starve the government so that it cannot have the revenues to be involved in as many programs as it currently is. Is that part of the goal here?
Well, I can't defend every statement that's made in the Republican Party, nor would Bob Kuttner want to defend every statement that's made in the Democratic Party. But I would say this, most Republicans, and certainly Newt Gingrich and Bob Dole, who asked me to head up this commission, have suggested that we want a bigger economy, we want a broader tax base, we want to encourage the formation of capital, which even Bob Kuttner would recognize has to flow down into the neighborhoods and under people who've never had
good, Bob
But
Kuttner.
when we had the so-called supply-side tax cut in 1981, the economy grew at just the same rate it did in the 70s. Savings and investment actually fell, and the deficit quadrupled. And there is this myth that a lot of Republicans hold on to, that supply-side economics was a great success.
Well, it was not. There's empirical evidence, Bob. Now, just for a moment.
Well, you're saying that the debt didn't quadruple?
In the consequence of bringing down inflation, we were taxing the inflation of the economy, and there was a built-in bias for the government to inflate because there was no indexed income tax. We still don't index capital gain tax. And frankly, the Armey plan, albeit we're going to study all of the various plans, I think we owe an enormous debt to Dick Armey for helping to start the debate.
Well, a debt of an additional $200 billion a year is what we're going to owe Dick Armey.
That's the Treasury Department, and if you trust the Treasury Department, you'll love the Mexican peso bailout. I mean, they made a mistake on that, and they're going to make it on this. I think the American people want an overhaul of the tax system. Even Jimmy Carter said it's a disgrace.
What we will talk about is whether they're likely to get it or not when we come back in just a moment.
Got a big paint job in the works? Behr Premium Plus Exterior is the perfect paint to cut even the biggest paint job down to size. Behr Premium Plus, only at the Home Depot. Why pay a premium for premium paint? Behr Premium Plus Interior Paint from Home Depot has everything you find in a premium paint from a specialty paint store. But since it can cost over a third less, why pay a premium for premium paint? Behr Premium Plus, only at the Home Depot.
To optimize the characteristics of the new Chrysler Sebring, some assembly is required. Insert Figure 1. Into Figure 8. Think of it as a luxury coupe and a sport coupe nicely put together. The new Chrysler Sebring, the cure for the common coupe.
Next, what men and women should know about prostate disease.
Plus, new music from country superstar Tanya Tucker on the next Good Morning America.
Here on ABC.
Not 3 months. Everyone does that. Not 6 months. Good, but not good enough. Believe it or not, 1 full year. Silo has 0% financing for 1 full year on our best-selling merchandise with no down payments and no interest. 0% on the best-selling audio, video, appliances, and home office. 0% for 1 full year on the top name brands. Better hurry to Silo. This fantastic offer ends Saturday.
I want a man that's thoughtful, intelligent, a good listener. Oh, and I want someone who's very experienced. Well, at plumbing.
The Eagle Experience. Eagle experts that know their stuff. Eagle Hardware and Garden. More of everything. Choose from Bellwith Quality Hardware, a huge selection of cabinet handles, hinges, and pulls for any cabinet need. Bellwith Hardware quality at Eagle Hardware and Garden.
If you don't want your fish swimming in these waters, try the world's greatest tuna sub at Subway. Chunk-like tuna, fresh-baked bread, and all your favorite fixins. So remember, it's their way or Subway, the place where fresh is the taste.
Some people love the seafood, or all the fresh fixins. But what gets most people is the crab. The Subway Seafood and Crab Sub. Subway, the place where fresh is the taste.
And we're back with Robert Kuttner and Jack Kemp. Congressman Kemp, you were there in Congress you've talked about the 81 cut, but you were also there through the 1986 tax reform, quote unquote. You know how hard it is. You heard all of the people lining up and saying, this will kill us. If you get rid of charitable contributions, that will be terrible for us. If you get rid of the income of the mortgage deduction, that will kill us. Governors saying, if you get rid of state tax deductions, that will kill the states. If you get rid of city tax deductions, all of that. How likely is it to really do this?
Well, it is likely, given the fact that the Cold War is over, the American people elected a new Congress, and most of the Republican candidates that I know of right now are running on some form of a flatter, fairer, simpler, lower tax rate system. And I wouldn't be surprised, Cokie, even though Robert Kuttner has mentioned the Treasury Department, I wouldn't be surprised if even the Clinton administration isn't secretly looking at some major overhaul of the tax system for 1996/97. Just to finish the point. Secondly, I think Dick Armey is right. About 90% of all the people who disagree with the flat tax live within the Beltway. I think the American people, particularly on this day, want an overhaul of a system that, as I said earlier, Jimmy Carter called a national disgrace. It has to be done to make our economy more efficient and begin to grow again and open up opportunities for low-income people to become middle-income
Well,
people.
you can simplify the tax system very, very substantially without giving up the idea of taxation on the basis of ability to pay. And secondly, this idea that everybody would be treated the same by a complete simplified tax system with no deductions, no exemptions, looks better than it actually is. For example, if you make $60,000 a year and you have a serious illness and you have $60,000 a year, and you have a serious illness and you have $30,000 worth of doctor bills, you don't have the same disposable income as somebody who makes $60,000 a year and doesn't have doctor bills. I think you ought to be able to deduct those doctor bills.
Well, right now,
and I also think
Bob,
that the mortgage interest deduction. Jack, you used to be Secretary of HUD. The mortgage interest deduction is one of the great stimuli to home ownership. Why throw that overboard for the sake of tax
Well,
simplification?
you've made two very important points, and I would like to
Thank you.
address them. First of all, given the system with high marginal tax rates, we should have every deduction and credit and exemption we can possibly have. So I think they're precious. I have defended the interest deduction for mortgages, and I think that people ought to be able to own their own health insurance by being able to totally deduct it off their pre-tax income. However, if a $60,000 family were taxed effectively at about 4%, they would have $56,000 today after taxes with which to purchase health insurance that would protect them against any catastrophic long-term debilitating illness.
A $60,000 family being taxed at 4%.
That's the effective tax.
Well, it's fantasy because
It
a
is a fantasy,
$60,000 family is already better off than the average family, and if a family that's that well off is paying a tax of 4%...
Now you're changing the goalposts. You
if
just changed the...
You know a lot about football, but let's talk about taxes.
Bob, you use $60,000.
If a $60,000 a year family, and don't forget, the average family makes a shade under 40. If a $60,000 a year family is paying income tax at the rate of 4%...
Effectively.
Who is going to pay the taxes, Jack?
Bob.
That's fantasy. The
Bob,
numbers don't work.
Well, they don't work for you
Armey makes it up.
Bob,
he makes it up.
Wait
the
a
numbers
minute.
don't work.
Wait, Bob, just a minute. You are defending a system as it is currently constructed, A. B, you've defended a 91... You said the economy grew with a 91% tax rate, as well as it did in the 1980s under Reagan and the tax cuts, and that's just demonstrably untrue. It is not a fact. There's no empirical
grew faster
evidence.
in the 40s than in the 70s.
Bob, let me finish my point. The economy grew without inflation better in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan and the tax cuts than it did in the 1970s. You can't make the American people believe that Jimmy Carter's economic policies worked better than Ronald Reagan's. We just had an election. That's why you got Newt Gingrich as Speaker. The American people don't buy soap the rich.
Let me ask you something, then. What do you think? I mean, why has this suddenly reached a point where we really are talking about Congress actually passing it? I'll start with you, Bob Kuttner.
Well, it's reached a point where Congress is seriously considering this because the Republicans happen to have a narrow majority in both houses. So this is part of the program of many Republicans, and they're fairly disciplined. And so it suddenly becomes serious, but it doesn't make it good policy.
But Congressman Kemp, you know better than most that it wasn't always the policy of most Republicans.
No, it really
what's
wasn't.
happened?
It really wasn't. Well, a couple of things. Number one, I think the 1980 experiment with supply-side economics did work, despite Robert Kuttner's arguments to the contrary. But number two, we had a debate in 1994. Last November 8th, the American people decided that the House Republican Newt Gingrich contract, plus the idea of electing a new Congress, has convinced the American people that Reaganomics, despite what Bob Kuttner says, and cutting tax rates is far more preferable than raising tax rates, soaking the rich, and punishing
We're out of
success.
time, gentlemen, but what you're basically saying is that an election happened.
That's
an election
right.
happened. Now we can change.
And we'll see if we do when we come
Or
back.
we can quadruple the debt again.
I'll be back in a moment. Thank you both.
Weeds keep coming back. Then kill the roots with Roundup. No root, no weed, no problem. Roundup.
The fall catalog online was just the beginning. We could set up our own bookstore on the internet. Gramercy Press in cyberspace. Click the book they want right on the screen. Bingo. Next thing they know, they're reading the baby. Pay right with their credit cards. It's secured. We can go to the schools. Textbooks direct to the children's little hands. Cool. We're on the highway.
There's a new direction in touring luxury sedans. One that raises levels of luxury and refinement to new heights. Introducing the new Acura TL series. If you're ready for a change, this is the turning point.
Weeds keep coming back. Then kill the roots with Roundup. No root, no weed, no problem. Roundup.
With a splash, spring is here at your Les Schwab Tire Centers. Sale prices start at $14.99. Exceptional spring savings on Les Schwab's most popular tires. Z800 Plus, the 80,000-mile tire. And all new for $95, Z800 Plus in the 60-65 series. Both on sale. Spring sale prices on small car, large car, performance pickup, sport utility, and RV. All this and much, much more.
All at the sign, the Les Schwab sign.
Some mowers come with a 2-year warranty, but there's a spring attached. They only cover manufacturer's defects. And others warranted for 7 years, but there's a string attached. The engine's only covered for 3. But with the new Toro Super Recycler mower, if anything goes wrong within 5 years of normal use, Toro will fix it free. Our string, it's attached to a starting guarantee. Toro, when you want it done right.
Tomorrow on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, an extraordinary new device that keeps people alive while they wait for a heart transplant. That story tomorrow on this ABC station. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Cokie Roberts in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
For information about Nightline on America Online, call 1-800-772-4222. For videocassette inquiries, call 1-800-913-3434. The price is $29.95, plus $4 for shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.